Hi everyone! In this video, I'll introduce you to Articulate Storyline 360, the most popular e-learning development tool out there. For the purposes of this video, I'll assume that you have already started your Storyline 1-month free trial, which is enough for the purposes of this course, or activated your subscription. As a Boise State student, you are able to get academic pricing, which brings the standard $1,100 price to $549 for the yearly subscription as of the time of this recording. Also, a reminder that Storyline is only available for Windows devices. If you have a Mac, you can go through the steps to install Boot Camp or a virtual machine in your device so you can run Windows on it. Instructions on how to do so are included on Canvas. When you first open Articulate, you'll see this window, which presents all the features and apps included in the Articulate 360 subscription. You click on the top option to launch Storyline. When you open the Storyline app, you'll see 3 different options that you can choose from to start creating your module: New Project, Record Screen, and Import. Clicking on the first option will launch a blank project. With Record Screen, you can start creating a project by capturing content on your screen. Import allows you to start your project using, for instance, a previously created PowerPoint presentation or an existing Storyline template. You can download Storyline templates for different content and interaction types in Articulate's eLearning Heroes community. For the purposes of this course, we'll start our module from scratch. Creating a new project in Storyline will lead you to this interface that might be overwhelming if you don't have Storyline experience. This is called the Story View, which allows you to view the progression and flow of your entire project. We'll get back to the Story View in our next video. For now, we'll go ahead and click on the Untitled slide. This view will look a lot more familiar if you have ever used PowerPoint. That is not surprising, since Storyline uses the same slide-based logic for content creation. Storyline does, however, offer a lot more in terms of interactivity for e-learning development. You will see, in the Insert tab, the different types of multimedia content that you can add to slides: characters, photos, illustrations, videos, and even 360-degree images. There are also many options for interactivity in this tab, such as buttons, sliders, dials, and hotspots. The Slides tab offers different options to add to your module or customize your slides. Out of the box, Storyline has many slide templates that you can use in its content library. There are, for example, slide templates for different types of content slides and learning scenarios, which are particularly relevant for your final project. Since we're here, let's select the welcome slide from the content library for our module. If this is your first time using this template, Storyline might take a couple of minutes to download it. We can then delete our original title slide and rename this one. You'll also find, in this tab, options for adding assessment to your course. We'll cover those in our next video. Moving on. The Design tab allows you to customize your basic slide style, just like in PowerPoint. You can customize the colors and fonts of your slides and set up different background styles. The Transitions and Animations tabs are where you find options to add visual effects to your module, such as transitions between slides and animations for in-slide graphics and text. Remember to consider that this is an e-learning module, and as such, transitions and animations should be used, taking the learning experience into consideration. I recommend not using flashy animations or transitions when creating your modules, as those might be too distracting. The View tab includes options to change the Storyline workspace between story and slide views, options to edit your slide and feedback master slides, and other visualization options such as zoom and fit to window. Making changes to slide and feedback master slides according to the content and visual style of your e-learning modules may be a time-consuming task, but in the end, you'll be spending less time figuring out visual styles and slide organization if you go through that at the start of the development process. Note that making changes to slide and feedback master slides is encouraged, but not required for your final project. Finally, the View tab also includes a media library that you can use to keep track of the images, characters, audio, and video you included in your module. Now let's look at the actual development workspace. On the left side of the screen, you'll see the list of slides. You'll notice that there is a drop-down menu at the top of the list. That is because you can create different scenes and storyline within which you will include your slides per se. I recommend experimenting with scenes if you're creating a complex learning object that demands a lot of organization within the storyline file. You'll also see that we have our title slide here. Now, we'll right-click on the Scenes tab and create a new slide. We have many options to choose from. I'll select the section title slide template. Let's name this Content slide. In our Content slide, you see that the timeline has been populated with many resources. The timeline includes all of the visuals and audio included in a given slide. In this case, we have many image and text components. Note that there are also timings here. You can manipulate the timing for different slide components so they appear, for instance, later in the slide. We can do this with the header, for instance. You can also adjust the slide length by dragging the line for slide components. And here it is. Now let's look at the Triggers tab. Here you'll see all the interactions available on this slide. In our case, we only have player triggers. Learners will advance or return to previous slides by using the next and previous player buttons. We'll look at the player options in a minute. You can manually create buttons and triggers to give learners the option to interact with slides by using the actual slide environment. Let's see how this works. I'll navigate to our title slide and manually create a next button. We'll first go to Insert, and then choose Button. There are many different styles of buttons we can choose from. We'll go with the rounded corner style. Let's then change the visual style to a gray tone so it matches the color scheme of our template. Then, we can right-click on the button we created and click on Edit Text. Let's name this Next and change the font to Articulate Extra Bold for better readability. We'll then add a trigger so we can use this button to advance to the next slide. Let's click on Create a New Trigger here. The default action is Jump to Next Slide, but you can change it depending on the function of your trigger. For our purposes, we'll begin by changing the when of this trigger. We'll select when the user clicks on and make sure it's set to the button we created. If we drag this window a bit, you see that Storyline automatically highlights the element on your screen if you select it from the drop-down list, which is super useful if you have many graphics on a specific slide. We'll click on OK. You see that a trigger has now been added to the slide. Let's now copy this button and add it to the next slide. You'll see that copying and pasting a button keeps the slide positioning, which is important for consistency. Depending on your slide design though, you might have to occasionally change the positioning of buttons or content. In our case, we'll move the subtitle and the main content components slightly to the left. Now, let's paste this button again and move it to the left side of the slide. Let's select the text and change it to previous. By now, you've probably figured out what we're trying to do here. We'll then navigate to the trigger for this button, and this time, click on Edit this trigger. Instead of Next Slide, we want learners to go to the previous slide when clicking this button. So we'll change the Next Slide here to Previous Slide. The next feature I'll cover in this video are slide layers. Slide layers allow you, for instance, to set up content in a given slide, such as feedback for assessment, without having to set up additional slides. Let's copy our previous button. We'll use it for the layer we'll create on the slide. To create slide layers, click on New Layer here at the bottom right corner of the Slide Layers box. Now, we are editing a layer within this slide. First, we'll rename the layer to Sample Layer. Then, let's insert a shape here, a rectangle. Double-click on it, and now let's change the color. Let's edit the text here and just say Sample Extra Content. Make the font more visible. Now, we'll paste the previous button we had previously copied and rename it to Close. We can now set up the trigger to close this layer. We'll edit the trigger we already have to Hide Layer. Fortunately, it already defaults to this layer, so there's nothing else we have to do. Let's click OK. To go back to editing the base layer, just click on Content Slide here. We just created a layer, but we don't have a trigger for it yet. Let's make it so the layer appears after users click on the picture within the slide. We'll create a new trigger and set its action to Show Layer. We'll default to the only layer we have, Sample Layer, accessible via click. Find the image from the drop-down and click OK. We can now test the functionality of what we just created. Let's navigate to the Home tab and click on Preview. Note that the arrow gives you options to preview different components of your course separately. But since we only have 2 slides, we'll preview the entire module. If this is the first time you are previewing a given storyline course, it might take a few seconds for it to process your preview. Now, we are previewing what we just created. If we use the interface buttons, you can navigate between the 2 different slides that we created. In the content slide, clicking on the image makes the sample layer appear, and clicking on Close makes the layer go away. Also note that you can view your module according to different device options, such as web and mobile. I recommend testing each option, as adjustments might be needed if you would like your module to be fully functional across all devices, mobile or otherwise. Now, note that the Storyline interface is still present on the slide. The last feature of Storyline that we'll cover in this video is the player feature. Let's close our preview. We're still in the Home tab. Let's navigate to the Player button. This window allows you to choose what features of the Storyline player you would like to be visible to learners. For now, let's deselect the menu and resources from the Player tabs to simplify the interface. The previous and next buttons in the Storyline interface are still visible, however, but we'll solve this issue now. I recommend making it so that there's no redundancy between in-slide and player buttons. Choose one or the other and go with it, with the exception of branching slides, which we'll cover in our next video. Let's click OK. You'll see a gear icon on the bottom right corner under the Slide Layers box for this slide. We'll click on it. Here, there are other options for customizing slide navigations. For our purposes, we'll deselect everything under Slide Navigation and keep the other options, since we still want the slide to advance via user input. We'll do the same for the other slide. Click OK, and let's test our module again. You'll see that player features have been updated, and users will now navigate the module using on-screen buttons only. That is all for today's video. As always, let me know if you have any questions.